Sometimes people will comment that my videos have helped them move through perfectionist tendencies and just do the thing, which honestly makes me so happy and excited. Like, that's gotta be an awesome experience, right? And sometimes people will straight up ask me how I have overcome perfectionism, or if I could please discuss how I overcame perfectionism in a video, and I'm always like, See, the thing is, I prefer to offer advice from lived experience. Logic works in some cases. Practical analysis of a situation can at times be enough to suss out a bit of, how about you try this, even if you haven't been through the same thing yourself. But it's nicer to be able to say, hey, here's what I actually did, here's what worked for me, rather than here's a thing logic is telling me might work, you know? I'm rambling already, but my point is, I can't offer advice on overcoming perfectionism because I've never done it. I've never had to. I'm simply not a perfectionist, and I never have been. Because of this, I kind of live in fear that any advice I would try to offer in this area would come across as ye good old, stop it, just stop being a perfectionist. It's that easy. I mean, obviously that's not directly what I would say, but let's be real, I don't have an understanding of the situation or experience. I don't actually know what it's like to be a perfectionist, so while I absolutely have empathy for those of you gripped in its clutches, empathy isn't really the same thing as understanding, is it? I can say, yeah, that must suck, but I don't actually know what it's like to exist with that suckage. And wow, let's not go down the rabbit trail of empathy versus understanding, because I already have like 5,000 words written under the title, "You don't have to pretend you understand in order to show empathy," and that's not what I've titled this video, now is it? So I can't tell you how to overcome perfectionism, and I can't pretend that I've managed to do so by some magical 7-step process that will fix your whole life for the low, low price of just $19.99. What I can tell you is why I'm not a perfectionist. I don't know if this will help whatsoever. I'm not at all gonna assume that it will. But this is what I've got, so here you go. It's just 2 things. Perfection does not exist. I've got a logic-based brain. It's simply how I was born. That means if something is illogical, I will have a lot of trouble accepting it, no matter how much the various influences in my life try to get me to accept it. This feels like a thing everyone already knows, which is why I say this may be completely unhelpful to people who actually struggle with perfectionism, but I'm gonna lay it out for you anyway. Perfectionism exists. Perfection does not. Perfectionism is the endless chase of something that does not exist, which my brain finds illogical. Therefore, my brain rejects perfectionism. At the very core, it's as simple as that for me. Nothing is perfect. No one is perfect. Perfection is a falsehood. And the greatest things in the world, like, for instance, nature, are beautifully imperfect. As with many, many other things, I wonder if much of the struggle surrounding perfectionism comes from unclear or inaccurate language. Are we using the word perfect when what we really mean is up to a certain set of standards? Whose standards are we trying to meet? Often in videos, I'll critique my own work, whether a garment I've sewn or my first attempts at a new drawing style, and almost every single time, someone will comment something along the lines of, "We are our own worst critics. You're being too hard on yourself. It looks great to me. You should be nicer to yourself." The thing is, I am being nice to myself. I find constant, undying praise, whether from myself or from an outside source, to be useless. If it's not balanced by genuine caring critique, then it becomes white noise, you know? I observe people praising children in this way, usually their own, and it makes sense in that context to build up confidence in a young child and encourage them to continue creating and exploring by telling them how amazing every smushy finger painting they've made is. But at some point, you have to start blending in honest critique, right? If you break into joyous applause at every single thing your adult child does, your opinion becomes less valid and potentially even not worth seeking out because it's the same every time. There's no recognition of specifics and no balance. If everything is amazing, then what's the point of trying harder or trying again? That's kind of a giant tangent though, so let's get back on track here. Not everything I've made is great or even good. Nothing I've made is perfect, so I critique myself because I often know that I can do better. The important thing here is that I'm holding myself to my own set of standards. I know me and my abilities better than anyone, and I know when I am capable of doing better. I know when I am not capable of doing better, which, let me note, has far more to do with my interest level than with my actual physical capabilities. If I tried a thing and ended up not really liking it or caring about it, I'm unlikely to convince myself to keep working toward improvement. And that's something you just have to learn about yourself over time and much introspection. There might be a person in your life whose opinion you really respect or who knows you really well, and you may feel that holding your work to their standards is good for you, healthy and safe while challenging. That's great, but what is pretty much never ever gonna work, trust me on this one, is holding yourself to the standards of strangers or the mass standards of the crowd that is society. We are all different. Our methods of creation are different, our capabilities are different, and our perspectives are different. We all have different ideas of what is perfect to us. So if I find myself slipping into that thought of, well, it's not perfect, I recognize that what I'm actually saying is, well, it's not up to my own standards. And that's okay. That pushes me to try again and try harder and improve. I'm not actually aiming for perfection. I'm just aiming for good enough for me. But once again, I must point out that my standards are never a literal expectation of perfection because I don't believe in perfection, which means my personal standards are pretty safe goals to reach for. Whereas if you are a person who has literal standards of perfection for yourself, well, you're kind of back at square one. There's no such thing as perfection. I also must side note at this time with a bit of honesty. One of the big reasons I don't like making things to sell, or even selling stuff like classes, is because as soon as someone is paying me for my work, I suddenly feel like I can't just meet my own expectations. I have to meet the broader expectations of society as a whole, which can end up being generalized in my head into something pretty dang close to actual perfection, which stresses me out. This is why I like doing YouTube. My audience is not paying me directly for my videos, which means I only have to meet my own standards of excellence in video making, not anyone else's. I started teaching recently, and my stress level while prepping for these classes was noticeably and concerningly high because people are paying money for this 2-hour chunk of education. My standards shot up higher than my own usually are, higher than what I consider to be just fine for a YouTube video, into this nebulous land of general societal expectations. I don't know who will be taking these classes each month. I don't have any way of knowing what each individual expects from the experience, and therefore my brain tells me that I must present something as close to perfection as possible in order to fully cover my bases. So perhaps I've sidestepped issues with perfectionism by creating first and foremost for myself, and perhaps that may also be a good first step into overcoming perfectionism for others. This is for you, and therefore must only meet your own standards. You can be kind to yourself and honest with yourself at the same time, but remember, high standards are not the same thing as perfection. Perfection doesn't exist. I think we often confuse perfection with mere existence. We see a piece of craft or art that exists, a finished work that impresses us, and because we are impressed, we assume some level of perfectionism was employed in its creation. We don't see the trial and error or the years of experience and mistakes that got the creator to the point of that final work. Often we don't even see the errors and mistakes in the work itself. We are blinded by its existence. I told a student in a sashiko class that I'm not a perfectionist, and they gestured to my 36 finished pieces of sashiko with vague confusion and disbelief in their eyes, as though there was no way on earth that I could have created these without utilizing perfectionism. They weren't lining them up in order and seeing the improvement in stitch length and spacing and tension over the course of the 18 months I spent stitching those. They weren't holding them 4 inches from their eyes and noticing where the corners and the circle centers didn't perfectly line up. And to be clear, I don't do that either. I don't care about small mistakes within my work because what's important is that the work exists. No one can be impressed by something that doesn't exist because you never made it because you were crippled with fear that it wouldn't be perfect. I didn't have to aim for perfection in order to create those pieces, nor did I have to aim for perfection in order to want to create those pieces. All I had to do was create them. Do I have expectations for myself when I make things? Yes, absolutely. We all do, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's no problem with having high expectations even. High expectations or high standards are not the same as perfection. Or perhaps I should say, it matters that we recognize that high standards are not the same as perfection to ourselves. It's also important to note that my expectations for myself need to reflect logic. By the time I started that sashiko project, I had already been embroidering obsessively for about 6 years. It wasn't the first time I picked up a needle and thread. So my expectations, the standards I expected myself to reach, were fairly high. On the other hand, when I try a totally new craft for the first time, my expectations are much lower. I am kind to myself, because the important thing is that I try, that I make something with my hands, that I test a new skill and learn from the experience and have fun doing it. My first attempt at pottery was far from perfect. I couldn't help continuing to fuss with the bowl, which thinned out the walls so much that when I pulled the bat off the wheel, the whole thing collapsed. Whoops! This was a whole new area of making for me, though. I had never worked with clay beyond making little food for dolls with, Sculpey clay as a kid. Mistakes and even total failure were completely understandable and even hilarious. So perfection is never on the table. Perfection is not possible. There is only the perception of perfection, and that's different for literally every human being. What I consider perfect is not the same as what you consider perfect, is not the same as what the person next to you considers perfect. So there's no way to create something or be someone who is perfect to everyone, which is why true perfection does not exist. What you need to question yourself about is whose perception of perfection you are aiming for. If you're creating a custom order for a specific client who has told you what they want, what they would perceive as perfect, then it makes sense for you to aim for their perception of perfection when crafting whatever it is you're crafting for them. But even if you are crafting a thing to sell in general to whoever happens to want to buy it, you cannot create for the perception of perfection held by a mass of faceless humans. It's impossible. It's stress-inducing. And if you're creating something for yourself or for the simple joy of creating, well then why on earth would you be creating for anyone's perception of perfection other than your own? So true perfection does not exist. All humans have their own personal perception of what perfection is to them, and in most cases there's not much reason to aim for or even consider a perception of perfection other than your own. But here's where you really need to dig deep. Your own perception of perfection has been manufactured over the course of your entire existence. What influences have impacted that perception? Who has crafted your idea of perfection for you? A simple answer might be for some people, a parent, a teacher, or a coach, an adult in their childhood who had specific expectations that left lifelong marks. It might be a sibling or a friend that you compared yourself to frequently. It might even just be society at large within a certain area of your life. But in reality, it's a whole giant mess of influences. A ton of tiny things probably impacted your idea of perfection in ways that you aren't consciously aware of. A book you read once, a scene in a certain movie, a throwaway comment by a total stranger. If you're finding that your own perception of perfection is harsh, stringent, mean, overblown, crippling to your creativity and motivation, then I'd urge you to spend some purposeful time digging into where that perception arose. It's important to make sure that your own expectations are realistic and kind. Seriously, y'all, please be kind to yourself. You deserve kindness from yourself. Chasing someone else's idea of perfection is illogical and pointless, especially when it comes to the world of creativity, craft, and art, which is the world we're in. So, stop that. See, I knew my advice in this realm would end up circling around to just stop it. Apologies. Perfection doesn't matter. While the core reasoning behind my lifelong lack of perfectionism is logic, there are times, like when preparing classes, that I can still be pulled towards that sneaky idea that I could at least be pursuing this non-existent end goal in the hopes of achieving something near it. Shoot for the moon so you'll land in the stars, or whatever the saying is. Is that the actual saying? Because that's also highly illogical. The stars are further away than the moon. If you shoot for the moon and don't get there, you'll just be somewhere in the upper atmosphere. Maybe the idea is not distance, but aim? Like shoot for the moon, and if you have terrible aim and miss it altogether, you'll fly right past and land in the stars? Illogical, y'all. Here's my saying for you. Set logically achievable goals that will challenge you without completely crushing your will to exist. It's not quite as catchy. Anyway, when I feel that tug of desire to start chasing the ghost that is perfection, despite my recognition that I will never catch up to it, I remind myself of one pretty much universal truth. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Even if you really think it does, that's your brain lying to you. It doesn't. I feel like this is sort of a subgenre or offshoot of logic brain, but I am constantly aware of how completely pointless the creative stuff I'm doing is in the grand scheme of things. Which I suppose for some people might be a thought that ignites a fire of depression. So don't just take that and stop watching the video here and say Charlie said nothing matters, so I'm never gonna do anything ever again. I don't know how it is that my brain works like this, but to me, it doesn't matter is kind of the reason that I want to do everything. It doesn't matter might lead some people into depression, but it shoots me straight into audacity. Again, I do have to note that I'm pretty specifically talking about like creativity and making stuff, so please don't take this to mean that I think nothing matters at all in all of life and all of the world. Obviously, many things matter quite a lot. And this is why I'm telling you this, but not offering it as advice. This is just how my brain works, but I totally get that this would not be a productive line of thought for a lot of people. I've been called negative, pessimistic, and cynical multiple times in my life, but I think it's because I find hope and comfort in places that most people do not. I get that it doesn't matter might lead straight to so don't even bother doing it for many people, but for me, it doesn't matter leads right into so you might as well try. My failure at a craft, at a sewing project, at a goal or a job or a pursuit of any kind doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. And that's so freaking freeing to me. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to win. I don't have to succeed. It doesn't matter. So I get to just keep trying. And hey, here's the crazy thing. If you just keep trying, then sometimes you will win. Sometimes you will succeed. Sometimes it might even turn out to be your perception of perfection. It still won't be objectively perfect because perfection doesn't exist, though. Isn't that great? Doesn't the fact that it doesn't matter make you so excited to do stuff? Okay, maybe it doesn't. Again, this is not advice. I cannot in good faith recommend anyone even attempt to twist their brain into this kind of thinking. But if you want to know why I'm not a perfectionist, there it is. Perfectionism is illogical. Perfection doesn't exist, and it doesn't really matter. I mean, how high are the stakes really? Be honest. Be super duper honest with yourself. How high are the stakes when it comes to that project that you're scared to start because you're afraid you might mess it up or it won't turn out completely perfect? Will you go to prison if you make a mistake? Will you be kicked out of your home? Will your relationships end? Will the entire world crumble? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, then actually, yes, please do care about that project very much. Thank you. But I don't know. Again, this feels like a thought that most people would find depressing, and yet somehow I find it motivating. People are dying. Absolutely horrid shit is going on in the world right now. Children are dying. So you might as well do the thing, because for sure, your stakes are lower than that. Even if the fabric you bought was really expensive, your stakes are lower. Even if it's a gift for someone you really care about, your stakes are lower. Even if it's the final project of your graduate thesis or however that works, your stakes are lower. Y'all, it doesn't matter. Messing up doesn't matter. Making mistakes doesn't matter. Being slow doesn't matter. Meeting your original vision doesn't matter. Perfection doesn't matter. You know what I think does matter? Being creative, making stuff, going for it, learning a skill, expanding your knowledge, teaching someone something new, encouraging others, being kind, taking a risk, expressing your emotions, accepting yourself, embracing audacity, doing the thing. I personally believe that the words we use and the way we frame ideas in our head matters a lot. To fight against something gives that thing a lot of power. It acknowledges the existence of that thing, the strength of that thing, and the energy you employ pushing back against that thing. What does winning that battle look like to you? To win against perfectionism is what? What does losing to perfectionism mean to you? What if you just gave up? Stop fighting, go home, surrender. Instead of giving perfectionism this high place of power in your life, what if you strip it of that title? What if you entirely delete its existence? You're not fighting against perfectionism because perfection doesn't exist, and therefore perfectionism doesn't matter. It has no place in your creative practice. Okay, once again, I feel like I've returned to the just stop it method. This is why I'm so hesitant to give advice. I have never felt choked by perfectionism, held back in its grip, unable to do the things that I dream of because of this looming shadow. So no, I don't really get it. I'm not actually capable of understanding that experience. And my 2 reasons for not being a perfectionist might be completely useless to those who do. But I do have so much empathy for perfectionists. I have so much hope that you will let go. I'm rooting for you, cheering you on, luring you to the dark side of imperfection with every video I make. And if this little chat hasn't helped at all, then I hope my catalog of projects does. Please don't let the pursuit of perfection steal the joy of creativity and making stuff from you. Perfection doesn't exist, and perfection doesn't matter.